TorahCafe.com.
Please welcome an international lecturer on Jewish mysticism and author of the JLI course Soul Maps, Rabbi Shais Taub.
My father's a psychologist. I rebelled. I became a rabbi. That tells you a little bit about me. So I'm going to be rabbinic for a minute. We know about the first Jewish home run by the first Jewish mother. We just heard about the tent at Emory. Well, there was a tent, Sarah's tent. And our tradition tells us there were 3 blessings in Sarah's tent. There was a blessing in the dough. That meant however much food they had, it always satiated the family, the guests, everyone. There was a cloud that rested upon the tent, gave shelter and shade, protection. And when she would light the Shabbos candles Friday afternoon, it would give light for the entire week, from Friday to Friday. Those were the 3 blessings in Sarah's tent. And when she passed away, those blessings left. But when her son Isaac married Rebekah and she came into the home, those 3 blessings returned. Why those 3? Why 3? Why not 2? Why not 4? These 3 blessings are the quintessential mainstay categories of the Jewish home, of our family, and of our people. These are categories, and everything else fits into one of them. Now I'm going to be a little bit psychological. Let's take a model, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know, the pyramid? Maslow had a theory that there are certain basic needs. When you meet those, then you meet the next. When you meet those, then you go looking for the next. So if you look at it, actually, it starts out at least fitting very well into those categories. The first blessing that Sarah had was a blessing in the dough. Food. That's the most basic need, a biological, physiological, metabolic need. If you don't have what to eat, you're not worried about making the rent. But once you have food in your belly, then there's the next level. That's the cloud on the tent, shelter, to have a home. Once you have what to pay the grocery bill with, then you start to look to pay the rent, the mortgage. And then you have the Shabbos candles, you have the light. That's the tricky one. Where do you fit that in? The food is simple, basic need, most basic need, biological need. The shelter, to have a home, you have to have a house. Your place to live. That's also simple. But what's light? And why is it one of the 3 basic mainstay categories of the Jewish home? Where do you put light? Light is intangible. It's not something you can touch, taste. It doesn't add anything substantial. If you're sitting in a room eating a meal and it's completely dark. So if you turn on the lights, it's more pleasant, but it's not like a new dish was placed on the table now that the lights are on. If you're in a room, in a house, and the lights are off, okay, it's not so nice, but when you turn on the light, there's not new furniture there. Whatever was there before is still there now. Light is this intangible thing, and it's seemingly not so essential. I mean, I got to eat, I got to have a place to live. Do I need to have light? And the answer is, oh boy, do I need to have light. Just like I need to have food and I need to have shelter, I have to have light. What did Helen Keller say? What's worse than being blind? Having sight but losing your vision. Light means a purpose. Light means meaning. Light means that there's something to live for. I just read an article in Psychology Today. There was an anthropologist who spoke to the Security Council of the UN, who was trained by Margaret Mead. And he was studying why Western youth become radicalized. Bubala, what didn't we give you that you have to run off and do something crazy like that? He says like this: We think the answer to radicalism is a moderate voice. He said, do you even know teenagers? When were teenagers ever attracted to anything moderate? The answer to evil radicalism is holy and good radicalism. He doesn't say it in those words. Those are my rabbinic words. But his words, anthropologically speaking, he says, what do the youth need? I'll try to say it the way he said it. They need to live a life of personal significance with struggle and sacrifice in camaraderie. In other words, they're not looking for comfort. Even they have comfort. These are affluent Western teens. You have the food, you have the shelter, but you don't have light. We talk about childhood obesity, that our children are overfed with physical food. I think we need to talk about the fact that some of our children are starving for spiritual food, for light. They're starving for light. There was a Jewish theologian and a radio personality in England, Hugo Green. And actually, he was a teen in Auschwitz. And when they brought him there, he was in the same barracks with his father. And he says he remembers one midwinter, cold, dreary night, his father had assembled a Hanukkah menorah with scrap metal. He tore fiber from his uniform to make wicks. And he had somehow procured butter from a guard to make oil. And Hugo Green says he remembers being outraged, seeing his father doing this. Not because he was endangering everyone. He could be killed on the spot for such an act. Not because of that. Not even because he felt indignant. What are you being religious for? He thought it impractical, wildly impractical. This is life. A lick of butter is energy, is calories. This is a survival. He said to his father, how can you take butter that we could put in our mouths and light it in that Hanukkah menorah? And Hugo Green says, my father looked at me and said, Hugo, if being in Auschwitz taught us anything, it's that a person can live for days without food, but he cannot live one moment without light. Our prophets told us this 2,000 years ago. They said, behold, days are coming, says the Lord, when I will send a famine upon the land, but not a hunger for bread or a thirst for water, but a hunger to hear the word of the Lord. It's not a curse. It's a blessing. The word of the Lord. Light, meaning, spirituality. The thirst for the union with the infinite, which is unquenchable in a good way. Food, shelter, there's a certain amount that you can take, and when you have it, you have it. There's been no time in history in which the Jewish people have had more prosperity, affluence, bounty in a material sense. And that's not a bad thing. It's a beautiful thing. These are blessings from God. But we have to remember to take that lesson from the first Yiddish mama, from the first Jewish mother and the first Jewish home. And that's just as much as you got to have food, you got to have shelter, you got to have the needs of the body, you got to have physical needs, you got to have safety needs. But if there's not something to be passionate about, if there's not something to live for, struggle and sacrifice in camaraderie, in other words, we have to send all of our kids on shlichus. And I don't even mean that as a joke. The continuity of the Jewish people is not about being served, but about being passionate servants who feed everyone they touch and everyone they reach with light. Thank you.